The great hall of judgment smelled like ancient stone and fear. Sarah held her daughter closer to her chest as 5 elder dragons stared down at her from their elevated platform. The baby made small chirping sounds, unaware that her very existence had become a crime. "You knew the law," Elder Kalen said. His voice echoed off the crystal walls. "Every Drathel knows the law. Birth outside the fire season threatens our entire species," Sarah wanted to argue. She wanted to explain that Torin had died in the mining collapse, that waiting 6 more months would have meant ending the only part of him she had left. But the words stuck in her throat. These elders had lived for 300 years. They had seen countless cycles of seasons. They would never understand. The child should not have been born, another elder added. This one was Mira, and her tone carried something that might have been regret. "You had options. You chose poorly." "I chose love," Sarah finally said. Her voice sounded small in the massive chamber. "I chose my daughter." Kalen's eyes narrowed. "You chose yourself over the survival of our people. The seasonal cycles exist for a reason. When births happen randomly, our resources fail. Our society collapses. We learned this lesson 2,000 years ago during the time of chaos." Sarah had heard the stories since she was a hatchling. The time of chaos, when Drathel bred without control, when food ran short and families fought families for survival. The Council of Seasons had saved their species by bringing order. She understood the history. She just could not accept that her daughter deserved punishment for existing. "What is her name?" Mira asked suddenly. "Lyra," Sarah answered. "A beautiful name." Mira looked away. "It changes nothing." Kalen stood, spreading his wings. The gesture meant the judgment was final. "Sarah of the Cartography Guild, you are hereby stripped of your place in our society. The collar will be placed. You will be taken to Kel-9 and left there with 3 weeks of supplies. If you survive longer than that, it will be your own doing. If you do not, your name will serve as a warning to others who might think themselves above our laws." 2 guards approached. They carried a metal collar that glowed with soft blue light. Sarah knew what it would do. The collar would dampen her abilities, make her weak, prevent her from flying. On Kel-9, it would make her vulnerable to every predator and danger the moon held. "Please," she said, hating how her voice broke. "Please, not my wings. How will I protect her?" "You should have thought of that before," Kalen replied. The collar snapped around her neck. Immediately, Sarah felt her strength drain away. The energy that normally flowed through her body, the power that let her breathe plasma and soar through the sky, it all faded to almost nothing. She stumbled, barely catching herself. Lyra started crying. The sound was high and scared. "The child goes with you," Kalen said. "Let it be known that we are not without mercy. We could have taken her from you. We could have given her to a family who respects our ways. Instead, you will have your daughter. Whatever time you have left, you will spend it together." Sarah wanted to scream that this was not mercy. This was cruelty wearing mercy's face. But she stayed silent and held Lyra tighter. The transport ship was small and cold. Sarah sat in the cargo hold with her daughter and a few boxes of supplies. The pilot never spoke to her. She was already a ghost to her people. Someone who had stopped existing the moment the collar closed around her neck. Through a small window, she watched her home planet grow smaller. Drath had 3 continents and 2 massive oceans. From space it looked blue and green and perfect. She had mapped stars for her guild, had traveled to 12 different worlds, had seen wonders that most Drathil never witnessed. Now she would die on a lifeless rock and no one would remember her name. The flight to Kel-9 took 6 hours. Lyra slept for most of it, exhausted from crying. Sarah did not sleep. She used the time to think about survival. She had studied many worlds in her work. She knew that barren did not always mean lifeless. There would be something on Kel-9, some way to find food and water. She had to believe that. When they landed, the pilot opened the cargo door without ceremony. 3 weeks of food, he said, pointing at the boxes. Water purification tablets, basic medical supplies, a shelter kit. That is what the law allows. "Thank you," Sarah said, though she felt no gratitude. "I had a sister once," the pilot said quietly. "She broke a different law. They sent her to a rehabilitation facility. She never came out." He paused. "I hope your child survives you. She deserves better than this." Then he was gone. The ship lifted off, leaving Sarah standing on gray rock under a dark sky. The air was thin but breathable. In the distance, she could see mountains that looked sharp and dangerous. Closer, there were rock formations that might provide shelter. Lyra woke up and looked around with wide eyes. She chirped again, a questioning sound. "It's all right," Sarah whispered, though it was a lie. "We're going to be fine." She picked up the supply boxes. They were heavy, and with the collar dampening her strength, carrying them was difficult. But she managed. She had to manage. Giving up meant Lyra would die, and that was not acceptable. The first cave she found was shallow and offered little protection. The second was better, deeper, with a narrow entrance that she could defend. She set up the shelter kit inside, a simple thermal barrier that would keep heat in and wind out. That first night, Sarah lay awake listening to strange sounds from outside. Something howled in the distance. Something else made a clicking noise that reminded her of insects, but louder, much louder. Lyra slept against her chest, warm and trusting. Sarah made a promise in the darkness. She would survive. She would protect her daughter. She would prove that love was stronger than law, even if no one ever knew she had tried. Rain fell like acid on Sarah's scales. She pressed herself against the cave wall, holding Lyra under her body to shield her from the burning drops. 18 days had passed since the transport ship abandoned them here. 18 days of struggling to survive on a moon that wanted them dead. The food was gone. She had rationed carefully, making the supplies stretch as long as possible, but 3 weeks of rations meant nothing when you were feeding two. Lyra needed to eat constantly. Baby dragons grew fast and growth required energy. Sarah had given her daughter most of the food, taking only enough to keep herself moving. Now the boxes were empty. The water purification tablets would last another week, maybe 2 if she was careful. But water would not fill Lyra's belly or stop her hungry cries. Sarah had tried eating the local plants. Some made her violently sick. Others had no nutritional value at all, passing through her system unchanged. One type of moss seemed safe, but it tasted like dirt and gave her terrible headaches. She forced herself to eat it anyway. Starvation was worse than headaches. The predators had found them on day 4. They were creatures unlike anything in the galactic databases. Silicon-based life, the scientists would have called them. To Sarah, they were simply nightmares. They looked vaguely like wolves, but with crystalline bodies that reflected light in strange ways. Their teeth were diamond-hard. Their eyes glowed red in the darkness. She had fought one off 5 days ago. It had tried to enter the cave while she slept. The fight had been desperate and ugly. Without her full strength, without her ability to fly or breathe proper plasma, she had been forced to use teeth and claws alone. She had won, but barely. The creature's crystalline teeth had torn her left forearm badly. The wound was infected now. She could smell the rot in it. Lyra was getting weaker. She no longer chirped and played. She mostly slept. And when she was awake, she looked at Sarah with confused, hungry eyes that broke her heart. "Soon," Sarah whispered to her daughter. "I'll find food soon." It was another lie in a long series of lies. The storm intensified. Thunder rolled across the sky, and lightning illuminated the barren landscape in brief, violent flashes. During one of those flashes, Sarah saw something that made her heart stop. Something was falling from the sky. At first, she thought it was lightning, but the trajectory was wrong. This was an object large and moving fast. It had fire trailing behind it. The kind of fire that came from damaged engines trying desperately to slow a crash. A ship. Someone else was coming to this cursed moon. The object disappeared behind the mountains. Seconds later, she felt the impact through the ground. Even from this distance, the crash was powerful enough to shake dust from the cave ceiling. Sarah's mind raced. A ship meant supplies, food, medicine, equipment. If she could reach it before scavengers did, she might find enough to keep Lyra alive for another month. Maybe 2, but the crash site was far away. At least 2 kilometers, possibly more. The journey would take her through open ground where the silicon predators hunted. In her weakened state, with an infected arm and no real weapons, attempting it was suicide. She looked down at Lyra. Her daughter's ribs were starting to show through her scales. Another week and she would be too weak to recover, even if food became available. Sarah made her decision. She wrapped Lyra in the thermal blanket from the shelter, kit, and secured her to her chest with strips of torn fabric. The baby barely stirred. Sarah gathered what little she had left. A metal rod from the shelter frame that could serve as a club, a sharp rock she had been using to cut food, and the nearly empty water container. Then she stepped out into the acid rain. The liquid burned her scales, but she ignored the pain. She had learned to ignore many kinds of pain over the past 18 days. She set off toward the mountains at a steady pace, not running because running would exhaust her too quickly, but not walking slowly either. Time mattered. If the ship had survivors, they might take the supplies and leave. If it did not, other predators would reach it before she did. The landscape of Kel 9 was hostile in every way. Sharp rocks cut her feet. The thin atmosphere made breathing hard. Twice she had to hide behind rock formations while silicon predators passed nearby, their crystalline bodies clicking and scraping against stone. Her infected arm throbbed with every movement. Fever made her thoughts fuzzy. She found herself thinking about Torin, remembering the day they met at the Galactic Assembly Station where she had been presenting her star charts. He had been a mining engineer, practical and steady where she was curious and restless. They had balanced each other perfectly. "I wish you were here," she whispered. "You always knew what to do." But Torin was gone, crushed under 1,000 tons of rock when the mine collapsed. She was alone with their daughter, dying slowly on a moon that should have been her grave weeks ago. The crash site appeared after an hour of walking. The ship had plowed a long furrow through the rocky ground before coming to rest against a boulder formation. It was smaller than she expected, a military shuttle by the design. The hull was painted with markings she did not recognize. Sarah approached carefully. Smoke rose from the damaged engines. Parts of the hull had been torn away during the crash, revealing the interior. She could see supply crates inside, still strapped to the walls. She was about to enter when she heard something, a groan, human-sounding though she could not be sure. Her translator implant had stopped working days ago when its power cell died. Someone was alive in there. Sarah hesitated. If she helped a survivor, she would have to share whatever supplies she found. Lyra needed those supplies. Every bit of food, every drop of clean water, it was the difference between life and death for her daughter. But if she left someone to die when she could help, what did that make her? The council had cast her out for choosing love over law. Would she now choose survival over compassion? Lyra stirred against her chest and made a small sound. Not quite a cry, but close. Sarah climbed into the wreckage. The interior was a mess of twisted metal and broken equipment. She found him strapped into a crash seat, his body bent at an angle that looked painful. His uniform was torn and bloody. His species was unfamiliar to her, but she had seen enough aliens in her travels to recognize mammalian features. Pale skin, dark hair, 2 eyes, no scales or wings. He was breathing, but barely. Sarah set Lyra down carefully in a corner where she would be safe from falling debris. Then she approached the injured stranger and began trying to free him from the crash seat. The harness was designed for his species, and the release mechanism was not obvious. She fumbled with it, her clawed fingers too large and clumsy for the small buttons. Finally, the harness clicked open. The stranger slumped forward, and she caught him before he could fall. He was heavier than expected, solid in a way Drathel were not. She lowered him to the deck as gently as possible. His eyes opened. For a moment, they stared at each other. She saw fear in his expression, which was not surprising. She was a dragon, after all, even a weakened one. To him, she probably looked like a monster from ancient stories. Then he saw Lyra in the corner, and his expression changed to confusion. Sarah did not speak. Her translator was dead, and she had no idea if he would understand Galactic Standard. Instead, she moved to the supply crates and began searching for medical equipment. Behind her, the stranger tried to move and gasped in pain. Sarah found a medical kit. It was labeled in a language she could not read, but the contents were universal enough. Bandages, injectors with various medications, a scanning device. She brought it back to him and held it out. He stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he took the kit from her hands. Their survival, she realized, had just become complicated. David thought he was hallucinating. The creature standing over him had scales the color of storm clouds, eyes like molten gold and claws that could easily tear him apart. Behind it, making soft noises, was something smaller, a baby version of the same species. Both were real. Both were staring at him like he was an interesting puzzle to solve. His ribs screamed when he tried to sit up. The crash had been violent. He remembered the pirate ambush, the desperate scatter order from his commander, the long fall through atmosphere with failing engines. He remembered praying to gods he had stopped believing in years ago. He had not expected to survive. He definitely had not expected to wake up to a dragon. The creature pushed the medical kit toward him again. Her movements were careful, deliberate, like she was trying not to scare him. It would have been funny if his entire body was not on fire with pain. "Okay," David said, his voice rough. "Okay, you're trying to help. I get it." He opened the medical kit with shaking hands. The scanner was standard military issue, which was a relief. He activated it and ran it over his torso. 3 cracked ribs. Internal bruising. Mild concussion. Could have been worse. Should have been worse. The dragon watched him work. She did not move closer, did not threaten. Just watched. Her baby made a chirping sound, and she glanced back at it with an expression that David recognized despite the alien features. That was a parent checking on their child. He found a pain medication injector and pressed it against his neck. The relief was immediate, if not complete. Then he pulled out a roll of medical tape and started wrapping his ribs. Every breath hurt, but at least he could breathe. "Thank you," he said, looking up at the dragon. "I don't know if you understand me, but thank you." She tilted her head. Her mouth opened and sounds came out. Not words he recognized, but definitely language. Structure and meaning were there even if he could not understand them. David reached for his belt and felt a moment of relief. His translator was still attached, though the casing was cracked. He pulled it free and tried to activate it. The screen flickered, showing error messages, then went dark. "Damn," he muttered. "Of course it's broken." The dragon made another sound. This one seemed questioning. She touched her own neck, where a metal collar glowed with faint blue light. David studied the collar. It looked wrong on her, like something forced rather than chosen. The glow suggested active technology. Dampening field, maybe? He had seen similar devices used on prisoners in high-security facilities. "Are you a prisoner?" he asked. "Is that why you're here?" She did not understand his words, but she seemed to understand his tone. She looked sad. No, not sad. Resigned, like someone who had accepted terrible circumstances. The baby chirped again, louder this time. The dragon turned and went to it, scooping it up with surprising gentleness. She brought the baby closer, and David got his first good look at it. The little one was thin. Too thin, ribs showing, eyes dull. Dehydration and malnutrition were obvious even across species lines. His medic training kicked in automatically. "She's starving," David said. "How long have you been here?" The dragon seemed to understand his concern, if not his words. She made a gesture that David interpreted as, "a while." Then she pointed at the baby, at her own mouth, and made a negative gesture. "No food," David said. "You have no food," she nodded. So she understood some of his meaning, even without words. That was good. That was something to work with. David pulled himself to his feet, using the wall for support. Pain shot through his ribs, but the medication helped. He moved to the supply crates and started opening them. The dragon watched but did not interfere. Most of the crates contained ammunition and equipment. Useless. But one crate held ration packs. Standard military food meant to provide nutrition for humans in hostile environments. Would it work for dragons? No way to know without trying. He pulled out a ration pack and opened it. Inside was a protein bar, a packet of dried fruit, and a sealed pouch of nutrient paste. He took the protein bar and held it out to the baby. The dragon took it carefully. She sniffed it, then broke off a tiny piece and gave it to her child. The baby ate it eagerly, then waited. Both of them waited, watching for a reaction. Minutes passed. The baby did not get sick, did not show distress, just chirped happily and reached for more. The dragon's whole body seemed to relax. She made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh or both. Then she gave her baby more of the protein. Barin looked at David with an expression that needed no translation. Gratitude. Relief. Hope. David found himself smiling despite the pain and the impossible situation. "Okay," he said. "Okay, we can work with this." He pulled out more ration packs and set them aside. Then he went looking for water. The crates yielded several large containers of purified water. More than enough for weeks if they were careful. The dragon watched all of this with increasing wonder. She kept touching the food supplies like she could not believe they were real. David sat down heavily, his ribs protesting. "So here's the situation," he said, talking more to organize his own thoughts than to communicate. "I'm stranded on a moon with a broken ship, broken equipment, and possibly broken bones. You're stranded too, for reasons I don't understand. We don't speak the same language. But we both need to survive, and survival is easier with two than one." The dragon listened even though she could not understand. Her attention never wavered. I have food and water, David continued. You have local knowledge and those claws of yours. I saw claw marks on the hull when I woke up. You cut your way in here to help me, so you're strong, even with that collar. We help each other. Deal? He held out his hand. It was a human gesture. Meaningless to her species, probably, but the intent was clear. The dragon looked at his hand. Then slowly she reached out and touched it with one clawed finger. Her scales were warm, warmer than he expected. Deal, David said. The baby finished the protein bar and immediately fell asleep in her mother's arms. The dragon held her close and made soft crooning sounds. David started taking inventory of the supplies. He had ammunition but no working weapon. The rifle had been destroyed in the crash. He had medical supplies, food, water, a broken translator, and a damaged long-range beacon. The beacon. He had forgotten about the beacon. David dug through his equipment until he found it. The casing was dented, but it powered on when he pressed the activation button. The screen showed a weak signal, not strong enough to reach his fleet, but maybe strong enough to be picked up if any ships passed through the system. This might save us, he said, showing it to the dragon. If I can repair it. Big if. She did not understand the words, but she seemed to understand that he had found something important. She nodded encouragingly. David leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes for a moment. His body hurt. His ship was destroyed. He was stranded light years from any human settlement with a dragon and her baby. 6 months ago, he had been worried about his career progression, about whether he would make sergeant before his tour ended. Now he was worried about surviving the next day. Funny how quickly priorities changed. The dragon settled near him, still holding her sleeping baby. She positioned herself between David and the torn hull opening facing outward, guarding, protecting both him and her child. David found that oddly touching. I don't know your name, he said quietly. But you're all right. For a dragon. She glanced at him and made a soft sound that might have been agreement. Then she went back to watching the darkness outside. David let himself relax slightly. Not sleep, not yet, but rest. For the first time since the crash, he thought he might actually survive this. 5 days of careful coexistence had taught David several important things. First, the dragon's name sounded something like Sarah when she said it, though his human mouth could not quite replicate the subtle harmonics in her pronunciation. Second, the baby was Lyra, which he could say perfectly. Third, Sarah understood more of his language than he had initially thought, and she was learning more every day. Water, David said, holding up a container. Water, water, Sarah repeated. Her voice was deeper than his, resonant in a way that made the word sound like music. Good, David said. Food. He pointed at a ration pack. Food. She said it perfectly this time. Lyra was curled up against David's side, sleeping peacefully. Over the past few days, the baby dragon had recovered remarkably. Proper nutrition and clean water had worked wonders. She was still thin, but no longer dangerously so. Her scales had regained their shine, and she chirped constantly, exploring everything in the crashed shuttle with boundless curiosity. The first time Lyra had crawled into David's lap, Sarah had tensed visibly. But the baby had simply curled up and gone to sleep, and after a moment Sarah had relaxed. Now it was normal. Lyra seemed to view David as a strange but acceptable member of her family. David's ribs were healing. The pain was manageable now and he could move without gasping. He had spent the past few days repairing what he could of the shuttle's systems. The engines were dead beyond any hope of resurrection. The communications array was fried. But the long-range beacon was functional, broadcasting a weak distress signal that might eventually reach someone. Sarah watched him work with obvious intelligence. She asked questions through gestures and simple words, and he answered as best he could. She was learning his language at an impressive speed. Your people, Sarah said haltingly during their evening meal. Where? It was the longest sentence she had managed in English. David felt a surge of pride, which was silly. She was not his student, but still. My people are far away, David said slowly. Many stars. He pointed up at the sky, visible through the torn hull. Sarah nodded. She pointed at herself, then made a pushing away gesture. You were sent away? David asked. Exiled? She repeated the word. Exiled. Why? Sarah pointed at Lyra. Then she made a gesture that David had learned meant wrong time. You had a baby at the wrong time? David frowned. That's why they sent you here? That's insane. Sarah did not know the word insane, but she seemed to catch his meaning. She made a gesture of agreement. Then she touched the collar around her neck and made a bitter sound. David had been thinking about that collar for days. It was clearly some kind of dampening device. He had seen Sarah try to fly once, spreading her wings and attempting to take off. She had barely gotten a meter off the ground before crashing back down, exhausted by the effort. The collar was hobbling her. I want to remove it, David said, pointing at the collar. But I don't know how. Might hurt you if I try wrong. Sarah shook her head. She pantomimed an explosion, then pointed at the collar. Booby-trapped, David translated. Great, of course it is. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. The rations were holding up well. David had calculated that with careful rationing they had enough food for 6 weeks. Water would last longer. If his beacon worked, if help came, they might be fine. That night, the silicon predators came. David heard them first, the distinctive clicking sound of crystalline bodies moving across rock. He grabbed his makeshift weapon, a metal bar he had torn from the shuttle's frame, and moved to the hull opening. Sarah was already there, positioned between the predators and Lyra. Her body language was pure aggression. Wings spread despite the collar's suppression, teeth bared, a low growl building in her throat. 3 predators circled outside. In the moonlight, their crystalline bodies glowed with an eerie inner light. They were beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Stay behind me, David said, moving to stand beside Sarah. She glanced at him, and he saw surprise in her eyes. But she did not push him back. Instead, she adjusted her position so they stood side by side, blocking the entrance together. The first predator attacked. It was fast, blindingly fast. David swung his metal bar and connected solidly with the creature's head. The impact sent vibrations up his arms, and the predator stumbled. Sarah struck while it was off balance. Her claws raked across its body, and the crystal structure cracked. The predator made a high-pitched shrieking sound and retreated. The other 2 attacked together. David barely managed to block one, his injured ribs screaming in protest. Sarah grabbed the other predator in her jaws and slammed it against the ground with enough force to shatter its body into pieces. The remaining predators retreated, their clicking communication sounding almost like fear. They disappeared into the darkness. David leaned against the wall, breathing hard. His ribs felt like they had been set on fire. Sarah checked him over with obvious concern. I'm okay, he gasped. Just need a moment. She helped him sit down, her movements gentle despite her size and strength. Then she checked on Lyra, who had slept through the entire fight. You're a good mother, David said when he caught his breath. A good fighter, too. Sarah did not understand all the words, but she understood the tone. She made a pleased sound and settled next to him. Over the next few days, they fell into a routine. David worked on repairing equipment and teaching Sarah English. Sarah hunted for local resources and taught David about the moon's dangers. Lyra played and grew stronger, providing moments of joy in their harsh circumstances. David told Sarah about Earth. He showed her pictures on his damaged data pad, images of oceans and forests and cities. She stared at them with wonder, touching the screen gently. Sarah told him about her people through gestures and growing vocabulary. He learned about the Council of Seasons, about the strict laws that govern Drathil reproduction. He learned that Sarah had been a stellar cartographer, that she had mapped stars and traveled the galaxy before her exile. That's not right, David said when he understood the full story. Punishing you for having a baby. That's wrong. Sarah made a complex gesture that he translated as, that is how it is. It doesn't have to be, David said. Where I come from, people have babies whenever they want. Nobody gets exiled for it. Sarah looked at him with an expression he could not read. Then she said in careful English, your people sound kind. Sometimes, David admitted. We have our problems? But yeah, on this issue we're better. He showed her pictures of his family, his mother, his younger brother, his niece who was about 3 years old. This is my family, he said. Sarah studied the images. Then she pointed at the picture of David with his niece, both of them laughing at some forgotten joke. Love, she said. Yes, David agreed. Love, Sarah pointed at Lyra, then at herself. Love, I know, David said. I see it. That night David made a decision. He started working on the beacon more seriously, modifying it, boosting its signal. It would drain the power faster, but it would also reach farther. Someone would hear it eventually. They just had to survive long enough. Sarah watched him work. "Hope?" she asked. David looked at her. At this dragon who had been thrown away by her people but who still fought to survive, who still protected her child, who still found ways to be kind. "Yes," he said. "Hope." And for the first time since the crash, he actually believed it. The beacon had been broadcasting for 3 weeks when it finally got an answer. David was sleeping when the alert woke him, a sharp beeping sound that cut through his dreams. He jolted awake, ignoring the protest from his healing ribs, and stumbled to the communications panel he had jury-rigged. A ship. Someone had picked up the signal. "Sarah," he called out. "Sarah, wake up." She was alert instantly, the way predators always were. Lyra stirred against her mother's chest but did not wake. David studied the readout on his screen. His heart sank. "It's not my fleet," he said quietly. Sarah moved closer, looking at the symbols on the display. Her whole body went rigid. She made a sound that David had learned to recognize as distress. "You know this ship?" he asked. "Drathil," she said. The word came out heavy with dread. "My people." David felt ice form in his stomach. "They're coming here?" Sarah nodded. She looked at Lyra, then at David, and he saw the decision forming behind her eyes before she even spoke. "You go," she said. "When ship comes, you go home. What about you?" "I stay, cannot leave." "If I try, they hunt." She struggled to find words. "Hunt forever. Hunt anyone who helps." "So we don't tell them about you," David said. "I say I was alone." "They don't need to know," Sarah shook her head. "They know. Beacon signal not human. They know someone else is here." She touched his face gently with one claw. "You cannot help me, David, but you can live. You must live." "That's not acceptable," David said flatly. "Must be accepted." Sarah's English had improved dramatically over the past weeks. She could express complex ideas now, even if the grammar was not perfect. "I broke law. I knew price. You did nothing wrong. You should not die for me." David paced the small space inside the wrecked shuttle. His mind was racing. The Drathil ship would arrive in a few hours based on the beacon's range. Not much time to plan. "What will they do when they find you?" he asked. "Take me back to Drath or kill me here. Depends on who comes." Sarah held Lyra closer. "They will take Lyra away. Give her to family who follows the law." "Like hell they will," David muttered. He opened a compartment and pulled out his emergency kit. Inside was a small device he had been saving. A backup transmitter, normally used for personal identification. "What are you doing?" Sarah asked. "Changing the plan." David activated his datapad and started recording. "I'm making a broadcast. Public broadcast. Galactic assembly frequencies." "David, no. Listen to me," he said, his voice hard. "I've been thinking about this. About your people's laws. About what they did to you. And you know what? It's wrong. It's morally fundamentally wrong. And I'm not going to let it stand." He hit record on the transmitter. "This is Corporal David Reyes of the Human Defense Force. Serial number 847 Delta 9. 3 weeks ago, my ship was destroyed in a pirate ambush. I crashed on the moon designated Kel 9. I survived because of Sarah of the Drathil people. She saved my life when she had no reason to help me. She shared her shelter, treated my wounds, and kept me alive." Sarah tried to stop him, but he gently pushed her hand away and continued. "Sarah is here because her people exiled her. Her crime? Having a baby 6 months before her government said she was allowed to. That's it. She fell in love. Her mate died, and she chose to have their child rather than terminate the pregnancy. For this, she was thrown away like garbage." His voice was getting louder, angrier. "The Drathil are members of the Galactic Assembly. They agreed to uphold assembly law, which includes Statute 47, the prohibition of persecution based on reproductive choices. Sarah's exile violates this law. I am formally requesting asylum for her under human protection. She and her daughter Lyra are under my care, and I will not let them be taken." He ended the recording and activated the transmitter. The message would broadcast on every frequency the device could reach. The Galactic Assembly monitored these channels constantly. So did news services. So did dozens of species across the galaxy. "What did you do?" Sarah asked quietly. "I made this everyone's problem," David said. "Your council wanted to hide you away where nobody would see. I just made sure everyone sees. The whole galaxy is watching now. Sarah stared at him. You risk much. Your career. Your people's relationship with Drathil? I know. David checked the transmitter. The message was broadcasting. But you saved my life. More than that, you're my friend. And I don't abandon friends. That's not what humans do. Humans, Sarah said, and there was wonder in her voice. You are all mad like you? Pretty much, David said with a grim smile. 2 hours later, the Drathil ship landed 100 meters from the crashed shuttle. David and Sarah stood at the entrance, waiting. Lyra was hidden deeper inside, tucked into a supply crate with food and water. If things went bad, if both of them died, at least the baby would be found alive. 2 Drathil emerged from their ship. David recognized military bearing when he saw it. These were enforcers, the council's lawkeepers. The older one, whose scales were darker than Sarah's, spoke first. The translator he wore converted his speech to English. I am Kalen, enforcer of the Council of Seasons. You are the human who made the broadcast? Corporal David Reyes, he confirmed. Yes, that was me. You have caused significant problems, Kalen said. His eyes moved to Sarah. And you were ordered to die here quietly. Making contact with an outsider is an additional violation. She saved my life, David said. That's not a violation. That's basic decency. The second Drathil, younger with lighter scales, spoke. I am Mira. We received your broadcast. So did the Assembly Council. And every news service in 3 sectors. She sounded almost impressed. You created a diplomatic incident. Good, David said. Your laws are wrong. Someone needed to say it. Kalen's expression hardened. You do not understand our ways, human. The seasonal laws have preserved our species for 2,000 years. Without them, we would collapse into chaos. Without them, you would be free, David countered. Free to love who you want. Free to start families when you choose. That's not chaos. That's life. You speak of things you cannot comprehend. I comprehend that Sarah is a person, not property. I comprehend that her daughter deserves a mother. I comprehend basic morality, which apparently your council does not. Mira touched Kalen's arm. The transmission has been received by the Human Defense Fleet as well. They are en route. Captain Ann Okafor of the carrier Resilience is demanding we wait for their arrival before taking any action. We do not answer to humans, Kalen said. We answer to the Assembly, Mira replied. And the Assembly is calling for emergency sessions. The Council is being questioned about Statute 47 violations. She looked at Sarah with something that might have been sympathy. This is no longer a simple exile enforcement. Kalen's wings flared in obvious frustration. This is impossible. One human cannot change law that has stood for millennia. Watch me, David said. Hours passed in tense standoff. The Drathil enforcers communicated constantly with their council. David's transmitter kept broadcasting, and somewhere out in space, ships were converging on this small, worthless moon that had suddenly become the center of a galactic debate. Sarah stayed close to David. She had not spoken much since the Drathil arrived, but he could feel her fear. Not for herself, he thought. For Lyra. It will be okay, he told her quietly. I promise. You cannot promise this, she replied. Then I'll make it happen, David said. One way or another. When the human fleet arrived, David felt relief flood through him. 5 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in formation. The carrier Resilience was massive, its hull painted with the insignia of the Human Defense Force. A communication came through on all channels. The voice was female, confident, and carried authority that demanded attention. This is Captain Ann Okafor of the Resilience. All parties are to stand down. This situation is now under Assembly arbitration. Kalen of the Drathil Council, you are ordered to take no action until the Assembly Council arrives. Corporal Reyes, you and your companions are under human protection. Does anyone object? There was silence. Then Kalen spoke. The Drathil Council objects. Noted, Captain Okafor said. Objection overruled. The galaxy is watching, Enforcer Kalen. Choose your next move carefully. David looked at Sarah. She was crying, tears streaming down her scaled face. It's over, he told her. You're free. The Assembly Council chambers were nothing like the Drathil halls of judgment. Where Sarah's trial had been held in cold stone and ancient tradition, this room was filled with light and voices from 100 different species. Representatives sat in circular tiers, each with their own translator and voting console. The sheer diversity was overwhelming. Sarah stood on the central platform with David beside her and Lyra in her arms. Captain Okafor stood slightly behind them, a silent promise of protection. Across the chamber, Kalen and 3 other Drathil Council members occupied their own platform. The presiding arbiter was a being from the Trell species, their crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns. When they spoke, their voice was translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. This assembly recognizes the case of Sarah of the Drathil people versus the Council of Seasons. The charge is violation of Assembly Statute 47, which states that no member species may persecute individuals based on reproductive choices. The Council may present their defense. Kalen stepped forward. His scales gleamed under the chamber lights. The Assembly misunderstands our ways. The seasonal laws are not persecution. They are necessity. For 2,000 years, these laws have prevented resource collapse and species extinction. Every Drathil knows this. Every Drathil accepts this. Not every Drathil, Sarah said quietly. Her voice was amplified through the chamber's system, and she felt hundreds of eyes turn toward her. You broke the law, Kalen said, addressing her directly. You knew the consequences. You chose to defy the Council. I chose love, Sarah replied. I chose my daughter. My mate died. Was I supposed to end our child because a calendar said it was the wrong season? Yes, Kalen said simply. That is exactly what you should have done. That is what every responsible Drathil would have done. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Sarah could not understand all the languages being spoken, but the tone was clear. Disapproval. Shock. A representative from the Vorn species stood. Their translator rendered their clicking speech into standard language. The Vorn people wish to note that we also have population controls. But we use voluntary measures in education, not exile, not death sentences. Another voice spoke up, this one from a mammalian species Sarah did not recognize. My people believe reproduction is a fundamental right. These Drathil laws seem designed to control rather than protect. Kalen's wings flared. You do not understand our history. The time of chaos nearly destroyed us. That was 2,000 years ago, David said suddenly. All attention shifted to him. How long are you going to use ancient history to justify cruelty? Sarah harmed no one. She just had a baby. If your society can't handle that without throwing people away, maybe your society is the problem. You are human, one of the Drathil Council members said with clear disdain. Your species has been part of the Assembly for less than a century. You do not have the standing to judge our traditions. Captain Okafor stepped forward. Then judge yourself by your own laws. You agreed to Statute 47 when you joined the Assembly 3 centuries ago. You cannot pick and choose which laws to follow. The Trell Arbiter raised a crystalline appendage for silence. The Council will deliberate. All parties will wait. The next 3 hours were torture. Sarah sat in a waiting chamber with David and Lyra. Captain Okafor had returned to her ship but left 2 officers to stand guard. Not that anyone would try to take Sarah by force here, but the gesture was appreciated. What happens if they rule against us? Sarah asked. David did not answer immediately. He was watching Lyra, who was playing with a small toy one of the human officers had given her. The baby dragon was healthy now, her scales bright, her eyes clear. She had no idea that her entire future hung in the balance of a political debate. If they rule against us, we fight, David said finally.
Captain Okafor already told me.
Humans don't recognize laws that violate basic rights. If the Assembly sides with the Council, we'll give you asylum anyway. You'll just never be able to go home. I have no home, Sarah said. Drath stopped being home the moment they put this collar on me. Then we make you a new home, David said. Earth has room. We have dragons in our mythology. You'll fit right in. Despite everything, Sarah laughed. The sound was bitter but real. Your people are strange. You risk so much for someone you barely know. You saved my life, David said. That makes you family. Humans take care of family. Even dragon family. Especially dragon family. He smiled. You're basically a legend come to life. My mother is going to love you. The chamber doors opened. An attendant gestured for them to return. The Trell Arbiter stood as they entered. The entire chamber was silent. The Assembly Council has reached a decision, the Arbiter said. After reviewing the evidence and testimony, we find that the Drathil Council of Seasons has violated Assembly Statute 47. The exile of Sarah was unjust. The restriction of reproductive freedom is incompatible with Assembly membership. Sarah felt her legs weaken. David caught her elbow, supporting her. However, the Arbiter continued, we recognize the complexity of cultural law and species survival. We do not demand immediate abolition of seasonal laws. We demand review and reform. The Drathil people will have 3 standard years to modify their laws to allow for individual choice while maintaining population stability. Failure to comply will result in suspension from the assembly. Kalen's expression was carved from stone. And Sarah? Sarah's exile is ended, effective immediately. The restriction device will be removed. She is granted full asylum in human space as requested by Captain Okafor. She may return to Drathil territory at her discretion, though we suspect she will choose not to. I will not return, Sarah said clearly, not to a place that valued law over love. The Arbiter made a gesture that might have been a nod. The Assembly recognizes this choice. This case is closed. The chamber erupted in a dozen languages. Some species were clearly pleased. Others, including the Drathil delegation, looked furious. But it was done. The decision was final. Captain Okafor approached them. We have a medical team standing by to remove the collar. Are you ready? Sarah touched the device that had dampened her strength for so long. Yes, I am ready. The procedure took less than an hour. The human doctors worked carefully, disarming the collar's defenses before removing it. When it finally came free, Sarah felt her full strength return in a rushing wave. Energy flowed through her body. Her wings spread fully for the first time in months, and she could not stop the tears. Lyra chirped excitedly, sensing her mother's joy. How does it feel? David asked. Like breathing after drowning, Sarah said. She looked at him, at this human who had risked everything for her, who had turned her tragedy into galactic news, who had refused to accept that some beings were disposable. Thank you. I cannot say it enough. Thank you. You saved me first, David reminded her. We're even, Captain Okafor smiled. The Resilience has quarters prepared for both of you. We're heading back to Earth. 3 months' journey. You'll have time to decide what you want to do next. Over the following weeks, Sarah learned what it meant to be human. Not the species, but the concept. Humans who had never met her brought gifts for Lyra. Engineers helped Sarah understand galactic databases so she could resume her cartography work. Teachers offered to help her improve her English, which was already quite good. Most surprisingly, David's family sent messages. His mother wanted to know if Sarah had any dietary restrictions, because she was planning a welcome dinner. His brother wanted to know if dragons played sports. His niece sent a drawing of a dragon that looked nothing like Sarah, but was adorable nonetheless. Your family is welcoming me and they have never seen me, Sarah said to David one evening. They were in the observation deck, watching stars stream past. That's what families do, David said. Blood or not. Sarah watched Lyra playing with 2 human children who had befriended her. The kids did not care that she was a different species. They just saw someone to play with. I was wrong, Sarah said quietly. About what? When the council sentenced me, I thought I had lost everything. My home, my people, my future. I thought exile meant death. She looked at David. But I found something I never had on Drath. Freedom, choice. Family that chose me rather than was assigned to me. So you're saying exile was good? David raised an eyebrow. No, exile was cruel and unjust. Sarah spread her wings, feeling the strength in them. But sometimes the worst things lead to the best places. I would not go back even if they begged me. This is my home now, with you, with people who believe that love matters more than laws. David smiled. Welcome to humanity, Sarah. We're glad to have you. Months later, when the Resilience finally reached Earth, Sarah stood at the viewing port with Lyra in her arms. The planet below was blue and green and beautiful. Somewhere down there, David's family was waiting. Somewhere down there, she would build a new life. She had been banished for giving birth out of season. She had lost all hope on a barren moon. But a human soldier had arrived, bringing with him something she had never expected. Not rescue, not just survival, but the chance to live freely, to love openly, to raise her daughter in a world that celebrated life rather than restricted it. As the ship entered Earth's atmosphere, Sarah felt something she had not felt since Torin died. She felt home, not the place she left behind, not the planet that rejected her, but home in the truest sense. A place where she belonged, a place where she was wanted. A place where her daughter could grow up knowing that she was precious not because a law said so, but because she was loved. The collar was gone. The exile was over. The future was uncertain but bright, and Sarah of the Drathil people, who had lost everything and found something better, spread her wings and welcomed the dawn of her new life.